let's start with this. Okay, and I was gonna do a separate standalone vlog, but children, obligations, not enough time in the day. Let's start with the first subject matter of the day. People have been sending me links saying, Viva, have you heard about this thing? The Public Health Act recently was amended in Quebec, and it added a provision, the amendments, which are shocking, offensive, and are going to blow your mind. Section 123, 124, and 126. So I go and I open this up and I read it, as does everyone else, for the first time, because I've never read this particular provision of law before. This is the Public Health Act of Quebec. Let's go all the way down to the top here just to see it. Légis Québec S 2.2 Public Health Act. And it says updated to April 1st, 2023. Okay. The object of this act is the protection of the health of the population and the establishment of conditions favorable to the maintenance and enhancement of the health and well-being of the general population. Thank you for empowering yourselves, government, to do whatever the hell you decide is necessary in furtherance of the protection of the public. I forget exactly what the terms were. People have recently discovered Section 123, and because people have never heard of it before, it's new to them, and people sent it to me and said, Viva, have you seen this recent amendment to the Public Health Act? It's shocking. Let's read this. Spoiler alert, it's not an amendment. Notwithstanding any provision to the contrary, while the public health emergency is in effect, the government or the minister, if he or she has been so empowered, may, without delay and without further formality, to protect the health of the population, 1, order compulsory vaccination of the entire population or any part of it against smallpox or any other contagious disease seriously threatening the health of the population, and, if necessary, prepare a list of persons who require priority vaccination. 2, we'll go through it fast because that was the most important one. Order the closing of educational institutions or any other place of assembly. 3, order any person, government, department, or body to communicate or give to the government or the minister immediate access to any document or information held, or even personal or confidential information, or a confidential document. Wow. Prohibit 4, entry into all or part of the area concerned, or allow access to an area only to certain persons and subject to certain conditions, or order for the time necessary, where there is no other means of protection, the evacuation of persons from all or any part of the area of confinement, and if the persons affected have no other resources, provide for their lodging, feeding, clothing, and security. That sounds like imprisonment. This, by the way, sounds exactly like the Quarantine Act, which I broke down in the early days of the pandemic. 5, order the construction to any work, installation, sanitary facilities, yada, yada. 6, require the assistance of any government department or body capable of assisting. Fine. 7, incur such expenses as necessary. Fine. 8, order any other measure necessary to protect the health of the population. As if 1 through 7 weren't exhaustive enough. 8, everything. Carte blanche, as we say in English and in French. Okay, that's shocking. If that's an amendment, it's very interesting, especially since it only mentions here, order compulsory vaccination against smallpox. Now, if you're reading this for the first time and you think this was a surreptitious, secretive amendment, and the government's trying to hide it by saying smallpox and not COVID, well, one flag should be going off there already. Section 124, the declaration of public health emergency does not prevent the public health authorities from exercising the power granted to them under the provisions of this act. While a public health emergency is in effect, the minister shall act with the assistance of the National Public Director. Is that the one? Yada, yada, yada. Okay, fine. 125, where compulsory vaccination is ordered under Section 123, the minister shall make the necessary vaccines available and ensure that the required health services are offered. The minister shall bear the costs related to the dispensing of the health services that are required. That's so nice of them. They don't charge you for mandatory vaccination. Where applicable, the costs requiring those vaccines. Section 126 blew people's minds. If a person fails to submit to a vaccination order under Section 123, a judge of the Court of Quebec or of the municipal courts of the cities of Montreal, Laval, or Quebec, having jurisdiction in the locality where the person is to be found, may order the person to submit to the vaccination. In addition, the judge may, if satisfied on reasonable grounds that the person will not submit to the vaccination, and if the opinion that the protection of the public health warrants it, order that the person be taken to a specific place to be vaccinated. That sounds exactly like what it sounds like. And people who have not heard of this and who have not seen this law might be inclined to think, holy crap, this is a new amendment. They passed this under the dead of night. Now they're going to go ahead and be empowered to stick that jab into your arm if you say, no, thank you, I'd like to leave my heart intact. Here's the problem. And I had to double check this with a couple of still practicing lawyers because I don't trust my own memory sometimes. This little thing right here underneath, 2001, Chapter 60, Section 123, that refers to the date of the provision or the date of any amendment. And so what some people who have never seen this provision were reflexively thinking was a new, shocking, and appalling amendment is in fact part of the original law, which came into effect in 2001. You go down to Section 125, it came into effect with the law in 2001. You go to Section 126, it too came into effect in 2001 with this law, which came into effect, if we go all the way up to the top, sorry for the nauseating scroll. Sorry, maybe it's at the bottom. Hold on, let me expand this so I can see the side here. Bring it all the way down to the bottom. Well, it came into effect in 2001 anyhow. The law has always been there. And that's what should actually be revelatory and shocking for everyone. I'm going to close this just so everybody understands that. You go down to Section 123. This law came into effect in 2001. This provision has remained unchanged since the law came into effect. And so the monkeypox was not a surreptitious way of not mentioning the Rona jab as relates to an amendment that was passed in the dead of night recently. This law has been on the books since 2001, much like the Quarantine Act, which we looked at a while back and found so shocking, had been on the books for decades. I mean, I think the Quarantine Act was amended from the original one, which has been on the books for 100 years. That law, son of a gun, I hear myself now again in the background. Gripe. I hear myself again. Give me a second, people. StreamYard? No, it's not this one. Oh, this is annoying. Is it here? Yeah, this is here. Oh. No, I still hear myself. I still hear myself. I still hear myself in the background. In echo. Okay, I'm gonna have to find which window is it that's opened. Give me a second, people. I'm gonna have Is it here? This is so there it is. It's right there. I'm an idiot. Okay. The law has been in effect since 2001, and we never knew of these provisions of law. This is how it works. Like, this is, I guess, the Great Awakening of sorts. That law has been on the books for 2+ decades. Shocking as it was that it seemed to prima facie authorize mandatory vaccination, compelled vaccination. They can lock you up and bring you to a facility to be vaccinated. Why it wasn't invoked this time around might have to do with the status of the Rona jab, whether or not it was under the EUA and therefore could not be compelled as a standard vaccine. I don't know. I honestly don't know. But for everybody who's thinking that this is a new law that was recently amended, first of all, don't spread it because that's not accurate information. You'll end up looking foolish. It's not new, and that should be even more shocking. This, by the way, from McCarthy Tétrault. McCarthy Tétrault is also one of the top, 5 or 10 law firms in Canada, talking about this act back in March 21 because it became relevant in March 21. It didn't become enacted in March 21, 2020. COVID-19, can they do that? Part 7, Quebec's Public Health Act and Civil Protection Act. And then it says here, this update is part of a continuing series. We are providing a brief overview of the current state of federal and provincial emergency legislation, how our government are using their statutory powers to confront COVID, and what affects their efforts, yada, yada, yada. Okay. What you need to know. On March 14, 2020, pursuant to the Public Health Act, the government of Quebec promulgated an order in court council that declared the public health emergency. We all knew that. We just weren't all familiar with the specific provisions of the PHA. Now that the provincial government has declared a public health emergency under the PHA, it may exercise significant powers to protect the population and to mitigate the impact of the pandemic. Among other things, the government can now restrict the movement of people, which they did, close schools, which they did, What else? Prevent people from gathering, which they did. Require the disclosure of personal or confidential information, which they did. Contact tracing people. Do you remember the days of contact? Oh, it's necessary. Quebec has not yet declared a provincial state of emergency under the province's Civil Protection Act. Okay, the Public Health Act, when the National Assembly enacted the Public Health Act in 2001. 2001, people. It was considered to be a turning point in public health policy in Quebec. The legislation gives public health authorities coercive powers that they may exercise when they consider that the health of the population is threatened. The province's powers under the PHA were used, for example, to order mass vaccination campaign during the H1N1 pandemic in 2009. I had fleeting memories of things that occurred during the H1N1 pandemic in 2009 because we had just had our first kid, and I had a vague memory that this sentence brought back memories of, not good memories. This is what it means to be red-pilled, people. This information has always been there. This law has been there in as long as I've been a conscious adult. And I never knew about it. I never cared about it until I realized that the government has the power to declare itself authorized to stick a foreign substance in your body against your will. On March 14, 2020, the PHA declared a public health emergency. The government may declare a public health emergency in all or part, yada, yada. Dr. Horacio Arruda, that's the guy who said that a curfew is useless to combat a virus, but it'll help people remember the severity of the situation. He used the powers conferred on him to prohibit any gathering of more than 250 people, or the closure of schools, gyms, bars, movie theaters. He could yet use his powers to impose complete or partial lockdown, which they did. This would be a first in the province. Yep, it was the first. It will never be the last. It was the first when he did it in 2021. It was the second time he did it in 2022 because it worked so well the first time. Yada, yada, yada. Specifically, let's just see if they talk about Section 123 here. Here we go. Once a public health emergency has been declared pursuant to Section 118 of the PHA, the provincial government may exercise a wide array of powers to respond to the emergency. Under Section 1, this is from 2020. Like, this is just dead of night. Nobody even knew about this. It may, without delay or without further formality, order compulsory vaccination, and we just saw this, order the closing of schools, yada, yada, yada. Can you believe it? We are now only discovering this provision of law, and it's so shocking to our conscience. We said they had to have just passed this in the dead of night and didn't tell anybody because they want to abuse of their powers to mass vaccinate, to coerce vaccination. And it's actually been law for 22 years. And we all knew that they were invoking the Public Health Act, declaring an emergency to lockdown, et cetera, et cetera. I did not fully appreciate at the time that Quebec legislation provided for coerced, compelled vaccination. So that's it. So everybody who's seeing that now, and you're seeing people saying, oh my God, I can't believe they passed this law. It's not new. And what's shocking about this is not that it's not new. Wait, what's shocking about this is not that it's a newly passed piece of legislation. What's shocking about this is that it's not. And such is the great awakening, the great red pilling, the red-pilled jagged suppository that has been rammed up our collective anuses, anusim. That is the only good thing that has come out of the last 3 years of government abuse, medical tyranny, and absolute destruction of all that made the Western societies the free democracies that they always purported to be.